Go ahead. Okay. Should I say my name? Okay. I guess the story I want to tell is about my father, who was a hippie and an electrician by trade, but a student since about his early 20s, college, of all things metaphysical, spiritual, shamanism, Druidism, Tibetan Buddhism, all of it. He studied all of it, and was a very majestic sort of character to me. It's like a very large mountain man, or like sort of like a mixed breed Native American Gandalf or something, with a big thick beard and long hair, and smoked a pipe and said very serious, majestic things with his very deep voice. His name was Larry, but all his old friends called him Bonzo. And there's a funny story there that I'm not going to tell for his sake of where that nickname came from. But he and my mother split up before I was a year old. He was remarried within a year, I believe, to my first stepmother, who I was very close to. They had two boys, so my half-brothers, and I have an older brother, and we were his 4 children, and then later on 2 stepbrothers. But he was sort of in and out of my life a lot. I saw him a lot when I was younger, and he was married to my first stepmother and living in Sugar Land. After they divorced, he lived in Montrose for a while, and he was a Rennie. He worked at the Texas Renaissance Festival as a soothsayer, doing tarot readings for people. And I just thought he was the coolest thing ever. But he was in and out of my life a lot, and we would, my brother and I, my older brother and I, would get letters from him, about what we meant to him and how he regretted not being in our lives more, and how he wanted to change that. But he was very much the type of person where his family, his direct family, was where all his focus really went. And he remarried a woman that he met at the Texas Renaissance Festival, my second stepmother. And they eventually moved to Tucson, Arizona. And I got to visit a couple of times. But I really didn't hear from him much. He sort of was into that. And when I was 16, I had an incident with a family member, and I chose to pack up my car at 16 and drive to Tucson to try to live with my father, who I'd never lived with. And we sort of had these romanticized versions of each other in our heads. I was his only girl, his little baby, and he was my majestic mountain man father, very Native American proud, and all of these things. And we'd smoke the peace pipe, and he would give me tarot readings, and we would do drumming ceremonies, and that's what I thought I was going for. I didn't have a very strict household growing up with my mom. And when I got there, they were very strict. I had a curfew. I hadn't had one of those in a while. I had to bring friends over to introduce to them before I could go out anywhere with them. It was just sort of a culture shock in a way. And while I was living there, I was actually sober at the time, and I met this guy and this girl through that, and we went over to the college, and we climbed on top of one of the buildings, and they began to spit on people, leaving a football game. I think I did it like once and felt really bad and like didn't do it anymore. And then we heard the police coming. So I decided to jump back over the fence that we had jumped over. And by the time the police got there, they asked if I had been over there. And I didn't want to leave my two friends alone to take the consequences. So I admitted it, and I got arrested. The only time I've ever been arrested in my life for criminal trespassing in the second degree, which is like basically going into an area that's posted not to, pretty much. The charges were dismissed. I ended up coming back to Texas. I was only in Tucson for a little under 2 months. After I was arrested, things sort of crumbled between my father and I. And I was not in a very good place. I didn't take it very well. Sort of this dream of this person was sort of shattered, and I think it was the same for him with me. And I wanted to move home, back to Houston. And I remember having a conversation with him and my stepmom, and he was so upset with me that he wouldn't even look me in the eyes. She asked him if Jaime moves back home, how are you going to feel? And his response is one that I'll never forget. He said, like I feel right now, like my daughter is dead to me. And broke my heart. I left a few days later, and as I was about to get in my car and pull out of the driveway, I walked up to him, and he did hug me goodbye. And I said, I want to know that we're okay. I want to know that if I want to come back and see you, I'm welcome in your home. And he said, yes, of course. And I came back to Texas, and I remember trying to contact him, and he wouldn't answer my calls or talk to me. And one of my friends from the high school I went to while I was there briefly, which one of my stepbrothers also attended with me, she and I talked on the phone, and she told me that they all hated me because I broke his heart and I hurt him by leaving. I just remember trying to get in touch with him. At one point, he became sick, and I didn't know, but I caught him online. This was in the AOL, instant messenger days. And I asked him how he was doing, and he said, he'd been sick, and I asked him if I could call him sometime, and he said that he'd been really sick and that he didn't think he could handle the stress of it, and that he loved me and I was his daughter, but he wanted to leave things at that. I'm not sure how much longer after that my older brother received an email from him basically saying, son, you're my firstborn. I'll always love you. I always want you in my life as long as your mother and your sister have nothing to do with it. And my brother showed this to me, and of course I was just crushed. My father had disowned me. This man that never really was very present, but now even this romanticized version I had of him was gone. And he didn't want any relationship with me at all. On my 20th birthday, my mom received an e-card, a birthday card from him, for me. He didn't know how to find me, so he sent it to her. And that was sort of a first step. He sent me this card, and I remember thinking, I don't know how to respond. What do you say? It's been years, and I don't know what to do with this. I've had no contact. He's cut me off. He's disowned me. And a friend of mine sat and helped me write an email response to him. And we started talking, and he had found out that he was terminally ill with the same disease that my mother also had and almost passed away from, but was a medical miracle, actually, was the first person cured of it. here in Houston at Baylor. He was not as lucky. The disease was not caught as early. It was a virus, hepatitis C, and it was irreversible, and he was terminally ill, so he reached out to me. He wanted to make amends. He wanted to try to salvage what time he could have with me at that point. It started out just emailing back and forth. Then eventually we had phone calls. My ex, at this point in time, who I was with, my fiance, had not been talking to his family for a bit and had reached out to them. And his sister had come over, lived near where we were in North Texas. That's where I was living at this point. And she wanted us to go watch Lord of the Rings with her. And I was so blown away by Gandalf. It reminded me so much of my father that I just left the theater in tears. I, at this point, hadn't seen him in 6 years. And I just really missed him. And I knew he was dying, and I didn't know if I was going to ever get to see him again. I'm probably going to get teary here. My fiance's sister went to their parents, who had been wanting to take a family trip since they'd been reunited with him, and they decided to take it to Tucson so that I could go see my father. So we went to Tucson, and I saw him for the first time in 6 years, and I spent a week with him. They left me there with him just to spend time with him. And we bonded, and it was so good. And when they were coming to pick me up, we went and sat in, Arizona, they have sunrooms. We went and sat in there, and he sat down, and he said probably the most healing thing I've ever heard in my life. He said to me, darling, as he always said, he had this deep Texas drawl. It was like this. He looked full-blooded Native American, except he had blue eyes and facial hair, but this like deep Texas drawl. Darling, he said, you are the kind of daughter that I always wanted. And that should have been good enough. And I'm sorry. And I love you. And none of the hurt mattered at that point anymore. He was there. We were back together. I got this precious week with him, and he made amends to me. And I left, not knowing if I'd ever see him again. And I would call him just about every day that I could. He had developed encephalopathy from the failure of his liver and kidneys, and it would hurt sometimes to just even the volume of a telephone call. But we talked just about every day, and he got to the point where he didn't want anybody that wasn't there with him already to come visit, because he started declining and he didn't want anybody to remember him that way. And then one day we were on the phone, and he says, I sure wish you were here, darling. And I didn't have any money. And I reached out to friends and family, and I was on a plane the next day. And I went back out there, and I got to spend another week with him. Just he and I, and it was amazing. And the day I was going to leave, I remember we were sitting in his living room, and I was just crying. I think I told him I loved him every 5 seconds. And I was just crying, and he said, what's the matter, darling? And I said, I'm just really going to miss you. And he started laughing. I wanted to punch him for laughing. And I said, why are you laughing? And he said, oh, you're going to see me again. And I didn't understand, but I left. And after I left, he went into a coma. And his wishes had been that he was cared for at home until he was completely non-responsive. He didn't want to be aware of being in a facility. So he went into a coma. At that point in time, what I was actually doing was I was a certified nurse aide. I worked at nursing homes. And so this was really hard for me because I'm taking care of other people and I'm not there with him states away. And I'm at work one night and I get called to the nurse's station. And I go up there and they say, Jaime, your stepmother just called. Your father is awake and she wants you to call her immediately. And so I went to the payphone. There was actually a payphone, which was weird. I went to the payphone and I called her and she was just in tears. And I said, what's wrong? And she said, they're not going to let me take him home. And I said, why? And they said, because he has declined. They don't think that I can give him the care that he needs at this point at home. Well, I was a CNA. And I just said, do you need me to come up there? And she said, could you? And I was there 2 days later. And they let him come home because I was certified to be able to care for him and had the skills to care for him. And it was a team effort. But I got to be there and spend the last 3 weeks of his life with him. And see all of my brothers came up and we all had this beautiful moment where he had a hospital bed in the living room and we all laid around him and he made amends with all of us and, said that his one true regret was that he hadn't been a better father to his children. And I remember we were just all crying and I said, he liked to be called Papa. I said, see, Papa, I said, you were a good father. I said, look, all your babies are around you right now. And he just cried. But it was beautiful. He would, anytime he could, he would watch the sunrise every morning and watch the sunset every night. And I would ask him if he was hungry. And every time I asked him, he, like a little kid, would just think, because he didn't know if it was going to be the last thing he ever ate. So he would be very specific. I want a grilled cheese, open-faced grilled cheese sandwich with a slice of tomato on each piece. And I want it toasty. And when I say toasty, I mean I want it really toasty. And he would eat, with every bite, he would just relish it like it was the first time he'd ever tasted it. He would eat Gala apples and call them nature's candy. Like it was just the best thing in the world. And being that he was this spiritual, metaphysical man, I had the opportunity to sit with him and watch the sunset and ask him things like, what's it like to know that you're dying? What's that like? And I got to hear his answers and his perspective on that, and it was beautiful. I think it was one of the most gut-wrenching experiences I've ever had in my life, but it was the most beautiful gift I've ever been given. That and my mom got better. So I lost one, but one stayed, and I got to share that with him. And he developed pneumonia really bad, and he had gone into a coma, and we had to make the call to move him to the hospice facility. And we took him in there, and we would go home at night, which I hated to do. I hated to leave him alone. But it was so much to be in the room with him because literally he was drowning on every breath. The pneumonia was so bad. And my brother Ryan's girlfriend had a dream one night that she was standing in the parking lot, and he was standing there with this, hospital gown on, and said, I want you to tell everybody that I'm okay, and that my day is Friday the 18th, which is October. And on that Thursday, we went up there, and I went into his room by myself, and I sat next to him, and I held his hand, and I promised him that I was going to take care of myself, and I was going to get better with my own personal demons and issues, and that I was going to make him proud of me. and went home to take a nap. And the plan was my brother Ross and I were going to go back up there and stay that night. We figured he'd go really early in the morning on Friday the 18th. And we wanted to see what happened when this guy took off. You know, we didn't know what was going to happen. This man that studied all these brilliant things his whole life and like did things like knew the Dalai Lama and like, you know, traveled, you know, did all these things. I mean, we just wanted to know if like something magical would happen. And so we all went home to take a nap. And I was asleep. And I remember I had a dream that I was looking for my fiance and that I thought he was dead. And I felt somebody sit down on the bed and touch my face.
You put it in your pussy.
And I woke up and I sat up in the bed. And I got up and I walked down the hallway. And my stepmother was standing there with the phone in her hand. And my stepbrother had his arm around her. And they just looked at me. And I got mad. And I said, he was supposed to wait. At which that point, I think my stepmom handed me an Ativan. Or some kind of something to keep me calm. Yeah, so I got him back briefly. And it was beautiful. And he knew that I was planning to get married the next year. And we had talked about it. And he told him that at my wedding, I would hang up silver bells so that he could ring them and let me know that he was there. And so at my wedding that next fall, just a little bit over a year later, October the next year, I hung up the silver bells. I picked his picture up on the wedding altar, and my husband and I drank from his chalice. And when we were pronounced wed, it was very dramatic. We had fireworks go off. And I had told my brothers about it beforehand, and I didn't hear it. But after the ceremony, my little brother Ian, who is actually now passed away, came up to me just in tears and said, I heard him, did you hear him? It was strange because he was the only one that heard them. And it was just beautiful. I have dreams about him sometimes, but I have a lot of things he left me, surrounded by him. We had a private memorial ceremony for him at the top of the tallest mountain in Tucson, Mount Lemmon. And there were about 10 of us. He was cremated, so it was just a ceremony, and we smoked the peace pipe. I wrote and spoke his eulogy. We listened to music that he requested be played. And during the ceremony, a honeybee at the top of this mountain in October in Tucson comes and it lands on each one of our shoulders. And without ever discussing it after that, years later we find out that that was like a very special, significant thing for all of us. So now, a lot of times when I'm sad, I'm sitting outside, or I'm having a rough day, I'll see a honeybee sort of fly around, and I just kind of feel like it's him checking on me. So, and the loss of a parent and the loss of getting a parent back, just to lose them again, like I said, is probably the hardest thing I've ever had to go through. And compared to the list of things I've gone through, which have not been very many easy things and a lot of really horrible things, actually, but that one was like waiting to bracing yourself to be kicked in the gut harder than you can even possibly imagine, and then it happening. And then it all settles and you don't know what to do after that. But I wouldn't trade it for anything. It's beautiful. That's it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oof.